Greetings and salutations, it is I. What is left of Ross Kane? Hello, everybody. This is the Daily Show, exclusive to Men's Radio Station. Got a cracker of a show today. Special guest. I've been after this fellow, well, if you forgive the expression, for absolutely ages. But you know what? Everything in life, the timing has to be right. And the timing, the stars have aligned and everything is great. But before we bring him on, ladies and gentlemen, you know him. You love him. He's the undisputed king of New Malden, and that is saying something. Mr. Neil Long.
Greetings and good afternoon. I am absolutely so excited.
I know, because you didn't know who it was, and you said, "Oh, I've got to get." I said, "I've got a fantastic guest." You went, and I was actually standing on the tube station. Get me, Mr. Showbiz, and I went back and I said, "Scott Harvey-Mitchell," and you went, "Oh my God!" And I went, "Yeah."
Yeah, as soon as I knew the name, I was like, "Oh my goodness me, yes, absolutely fascinating subject and one close to my heart, actually." So,
well, precisely so, ladies and gentlemen. Without further ado, or even without further ado, rolling in the deep, Scott Mitchell.
Hello, good afternoon.
hello, Scott. Good afternoon. Lovely to meet you.
How are you?
We're all good, thank you. We're all good. How are you? Look, straight away from northeastern United States of America. G'day, all. He doesn't talk like that, but anyway, there we go. That's how he is. Mr. Asa Don Brown.
Asa Don Brown. I was reading a book on Kindle and you were quoted in it.
Blimey. Wasn't the Kinsey report, I hope. Anywho, Mr. Scott, welcome. I'm so pleased you're here. I'm really excited you're here. It's been ages, but as I always say, you know, these things have to be at the right time, which suits you. First and foremost, how are you? How are you doing?
Do you know something? I'm doing okay, Russ. I'm doing okay. I think, you know, especially at the moment with the book coming out, everything is it's up there again. The emotions are up there again. I'm doing interviews. I did an event the other night, and of course it all feels very real again. And also that realization that I'm talking about something that has happened, which is this loss, which is she's not here anymore.
I know.
And I think, you know, when we lose people we love, first of all, the hardest thing that I think is to accept I'm not going to see them again. I'm not going to smile at them. I'm not going to talk to them. And I think that takes us a long, long time. And I am by no means through that period yet. It's coming up to nearly 2 years. But you know, I still get caught off guard.
But Scott, 2 years is, you know, we kind of talked about it privately, but you know, 2 years is really nothing. You know, I lost my wife in 2004, and it still hits me sometimes. You know, I think everything's, you know, I got myself organized and sorted, and like you, suddenly out of nowhere, you know, need I tell you, smell a perfume, you see a reflection in a shop window. Or you think, I must just phone and, you know, what am I doing? Of course it can.
And it can come when you least expect it.
Always, Neil. Always.
My grief experience, I lost my mum to dementia, Scott. My grief experience was when you least expect it. I went super practical. I was doing all the things I should be doing, you know, wearing the T-shirt with the big S for Superman on the front and thinking, oh, I've got this. And suddenly, bang, out the blue. But I would find, for what it's worth, the triggers would be less intense, less regular, and less long. For me, that was my experience.
And by the way, Scott, people watch from all over the world. This is from Manhattan, New York City. This is Elizabeth Green, Sir Philip's sister. Says, I know.
Good morning to you.
Yeah, and did I get a discount at Top Shop? Did I? Hell. Triggers says, she says, that's quite right. And this is coming in from southern Spain. Which is, that was from Michael. Good afternoon, everybody. So there we are. So all over the world. Now, when you wrote the book, was it because people say, because I wrote a book as well called Shout at the Moon, which chronicled part of our story. Was it cathartic, or was it just like, this is hurting?
I think it was a mixture of both. I think what happened was, I mean, to kind of go backwards a little bit, I've always kept diaries, and I've kept those since 1987.
Right.
And I've always written in my diary my thoughts, my feelings, who I saw that day, where I was that day. So what happened was, after Barbara passed, I went down to Sussex to stay with my family. They live just outside Brighton, where I grew up. And I just suddenly, I don't know why, I took all my old diaries with me and I started reading them. And it was very raw. I was very raw, but I'll tell you what it did do. I know you're shaking your head, but let me tell you what it did do. It helped me to discover the old Barbara. Because at that point, the image I had in my head was the Barbara that I left in the care home. The Alzheimer Barbara.
Yeah.
And I couldn't shake that from my head, Russ. And when I started looking back over these, the fun, the joy, the who she was, that special lady. I mean, she was always special to the last breath she took. But saying that, I rediscovered my Barbara that I'd met nearly 30 years ago. And to me, that was an incredibly cathartic and very powerful thing.
How long was it before you were able to do that? Because I'm relating the experience, but I didn't lose a partner, and I'm not saying it's the same thing for 1 second. But looking back at old photos of my mum, it would have brought up memories of childhood, and there was a long time before I was able to even think about doing that, because in the throes of the grief, it would have been, that's all gone, bang, trigger again. So how long? I know there's no prescribed time period, but how long was it?
There's no prescribed. That was most likely after a couple of months. I'd say after a couple of months. What happened was, when I went after the funeral, obviously it was a lockdown funeral, so there was only 30 people allowed. And funny enough, on the day, one of our friends, Paul Bennett, tested positive for COVID, so it ended up there was 29 of us, which I took as a positive thing, because I was 29 the first time I ever met Barbara, so I took it as a sign. I like to look for those positives.
Why not?
Yeah, exactly.
I'm with you on that. I love that. Love it.
Yeah, exactly. So when I went after the funeral down to the family, everyone was still in lockdown. I had nowhere to go with my grief but to go through it, very much so at the time. There was no distractions, couldn't go out for lunch, couldn't go out for dinner, couldn't see my friends. So in actual fact, I was already physically, mentally, emotionally shattered by that point. And when I look back on it, I think maybe for me, that was the best thing that happened. I really did sit with it. And I know I felt the full impact of that grief very intensely in the early stages.
See, there's so much to unpack here. One is Alzheimer's, and as I've been very vocal about it because it's something I'm passionate about, as Scott knows, and indeed Neil knows, that my mum, I adored my mum, she was fantastic, and she got Alzheimer's. And when it started, I said to the doctors, how long? Let's be honest, come on, just between ourselves. They said, maximum 5 years. 16 years later, had 16 years of it, as everybody knows. It was awful. So that's the first aspect. The second aspect is losing your soulmate. And I don't often say that, but you and Barbara were soulmates, and that's the truth of it. It wasn't just a marriage. It just was, it wasn't one of those showbiz things. You absolutely adored each other, and I saw you lots of times out, and that adoration was very, very visible. So it's a double whammy. How difficult was it for you? I know we were in lockdown and the pandemic, but it's I'm going to say this only because I know you. Barbara's your wife, but of course, to the rest of the world, she's this star, and there's some sort of subtext. Well, this is public property.
Yeah,
but it's not. This is your wife. How difficult was that to deal with?
It was difficult. I'd say it can also be comforting, especially when it was the kind of relationship that Barbara had with the public, and mostly I'd say in the UK. Yes, people. When we went away abroad, there were lots of people in America. We'd walk down the street and there'd be certain people that would say, "Oh my God, Barbara Windsor," and real old theatre buffs that would have gone back to the days of What a Lovely War, when she was
Sparrows Can't Sing and everything.
And EastEnders fans, etc., that used to get the show over there. It was hard, but I tell you what is also very comforting, when people were stopping me once we came out of lockdown, and people would suddenly randomly stop me, and I'd never expected to kind of be recognized, because for the first, let's say, 22 odd years of our life, Russ, I stayed very much in the background. I wasn't someone that kind of came running to the front. Of course, if we went to an opening night or something, I'd stand next to her for the initial picture. But then I learned very quickly that really the picture they want is Barbara. That's the money shot. So just step aside and let them see. And it was the same, you know, and that is also the same with meeting people in the street. It took me quite a while to adjust to it. People's reaction when they used to see her, it was very excitable, it was very emotional, and it was very overwhelming. So it actually came back to help me when they were coming up to me and saying, "We are so sorry about Barbara. She meant so much to our family." And the thing I've always said about her, Russ, is that Barbara evoked memories in people because we all knew her for so long.
Yeah.
She evoked memory in other people of their childhood, of their upbringing, of most likely their parents. And I often used to see people get really emotional when they spoke to her. And because they'd suddenly start talking about it, they'd say, "Oh, my dad loved you," or "My mum loved you." And it was an incredible effect to have on people, because we all see people who are famous on the TV. But this was a very special bond that she had.
What was it about her that was, she really was, I don't know, I was thinking while you were saying this, because, you know, we've all met loads of famous people. Okay, some of them are nice, some of them are ghastly. But something about Barbara, she was a lightning rod for happiness. I don't know what it was. She just radiated this, and I'm not doing rose-coloured glasses, because I was at loads of events where you both were, or Barbara was on her own. And you know, the popularity, you could just feel it. It kind of came off like electricity. It was extraordinary to witness, and lovely too.
Yeah, do you know something? I think it was just she honestly and truly. Now, listen, she was no angel, and Barbara would be the first to admit that, as she did in the books that she wrote. So I'm like you. I don't look. This book is not looking through rose-tinted glasses. I'm very honest in this book on her wishes and instructions, and made me make a promise to her that if I did one, which she predicted I would be asked, she said, "No, you do one." She said, "You'll do a good one." She said, "But Scott, you must promise me you'll be honest." She said, "Because there's no point in doing it if you're going to paint some picture that isn't true." She said, "Because it will come back to bite you." She said, "And also, it's the truth. And you have to be able to walk down the street afterwards with your head held high, say, this is who we were. Whatever I've written in that book, whatever people look at and pick up on, no one will ever take away the love that we shared." And that to me is the most wonderful thing. I could say lots of things in that book and people could raise their eyebrows. That's fine. You put something out there, people will have their own opinions. But what they can never do is take away that love that we share.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. I think also people appreciate
me feeling a bit choked up, actually. I'll be honest with you.
Yeah,
and people appreciate the authenticity as well, don't they?
Thing, isn't it?
Yeah. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't perfect, but I think most people can identify with not having always a perfect relationship. I think, but if you have an honest one together and you adore each other, my thing about a relationship, the most important part of it, you know, you must be friends and companions, and you know, we say soulmates. It's really important to like the person.
Oh yes.
We can all say,
how few people say that, though.
Yeah,
you know, they're a great cook. Oh, they're this, they're that. Yeah, but do you really like them?
Do you like that person? Important. Do you like the human being they are? Do you really want to spend time with them, or do you walk out the room raising your eyebrows? We all walked out the room raising our eyebrows. We all get irritated with each other as a couple. You know, you can't be together for 20 odd years and everything's like a Walt Disney film with little birds flying around your head every morning as Snow White steps out the door to sweep the steps. I mean, that's not real life, is it? But we did have something special. And the other thing that I think about, you know, what other people may think of it or anything else or whatever is said, the worst has happened. I watched Barbara die from Alzheimer's. I watched her slowly be stripped away. That is the worst thing that can possibly happen.
Awful.
Whatever else is said, or you know, that doesn't matter. It will never touch that for me.
I gotta say, Scott,
it's like you lose them twice, isn't it?
It is. You do. You. It's the only way I could describe it with my mum is like watching somebody drown, and you're standing on the shore, nothing you can do. It's awful. And they become somebody. You feel powerless. You feel useless. It is. I would rather. I don't want my kids to go through that. For me, it's something I feel I would literally rather, get run over by a bus sooner than if I had the deal, do you want to get run over by a bus or do you want to have Alzheimer's?
I've already had
I'd choose the bus every time.
I've already had this conversation with my daughter, saying, you need to do what you need to do. I also found, Scott as well, for me, it was like a learning curve, because when someone passes away or in that process, there's so much stuff I felt I had to learn, stuff that I wasn't even on my radar before, complicated legal things, etc., etc., etc. And I describe it as a learning curve at the time when you least need it, because my mind at the time was not receptive and rested and relaxed and open to learning new things. Quite the opposite. I've got so much compassion for anyone that's gone through this.
Yeah, I think
lovely things coming in. Sorry, just go on. I'll just read this very, very quickly. I'm sorry to hide you. I worked with Barbara on EastEnders. I was a prison officer, and her character, Peggy, was visiting her daughter, Sam, in prison. She was professional and efficient, but also took time to say hello and how do you do to all of us support artists, which is lovely. Good manners cost nothing.
I have a lovely memory of Barbara as well. I think it was when I was at Capital Radio, and it was the Help London Child Awards. I remember it's fading a little bit, but it was a ceremony, something certainly like that. And she was presenting an award, and I introduced her on stage to do so, and she was absolutely lovely. Yeah, so that's my memory of Barbara.
Yeah. She always was, and that's interesting. Thank you for that text that just came in. Barbara had a big thing about. I'm still friendly with quite a few of the essays actually from EastEnders, and they adored her because she always made time to talk to them, and she always used to say, "Listen, love, we're all part of this package. For this scene, these essays make up the scene. They create the atmosphere. They're with us. Why would you not include them in the conversation in between takes?"
But how many people? But Scott, we know how many people don't do that. They treat people like garbage, and then they go, "Ooh, family favorite, nation sweetheart," and you meet them, they're absolute monsters.
I know, it's unfortunate. Her thing was, she always used to say to me about, how she interacted, let's say, with fans, when people used to say to her, "Well, don't you get fed up with people coming up all the time and asking for your autograph?" And she'd say, "No, listen, love." She said, "Number one, it takes a lot of courage for someone to approach you and say, 'May I have your autograph, Miss Windsor?' or 'May I have a photograph?' They don't know how you're going to react to them." She says, "And these are the people that kept me in work, that keep me in work. If I haven't got 2 minutes to stop and say, 'Hello, darling, how are you? Of course, I'll have a photo with you. Of course, I'll sign a signature for you.'" She said that would say a lot about me. So she always had a very
it's interesting. Richard Dreyfuss would never had this whole, Jaws and all the other films. Great actor. He would never sign an autograph. And then when he got to, I'm going to say, older, right? Which I can relate to, he suddenly realized what a terrible mistake that was. And he thought himself, why did he go for like 40 years and being arrogant? And now he does, but he regrets it because it takes no time. It takes no time. And they go away and they go, "Guess what? I met Barbara Windsor. She was lovely." What you don't want is, "I met Neil Long and, I always liked him and he was so rude." You don't want that. It's horrible. Why bother?
I love the way you use me as that
Well,
example.
I was going to use me, then I thought, no, I'm feeling fragile today. I'm not going to do it. What were the first signs, Scott, of Barbara's Alzheimer's? Because this is so important to have this part of the conversation. What did you first notice?
Yeah, this one. Can we just go back to that in a second? Because I want to come back to what you said about getting, all the legal stuff that you have to go through. One of the best pieces of advice that Barbara's neurologist, Dr. Angus Kennedy, gave us at the time of diagnosis, and you've got to remember, as we know, at time of diagnosis, they're still very much together. These memory lapses are very kind of intermittent. They happen, but they're still them. They can still make decisions. They can still do things. at the time of diagnosis, he said, I want you to go and put your house in order, Barbara. And that was the time that we actually went and redid our wills. That was the time we went and put power of attorney in place, just to make sure, he said, because this is very unpredictable. None of us know how quick this will progress. Could be years and years. You could be absolutely fine, or it could be very fast. So everyone is different. There's no two cases, I believe, which are the same with dementia.
No,
everyone has their own journey.
And don't try and do it all alone as well, which is the mistake I made. Try and be Superman and do it all. God, no, what a silly mistake on my part that was.
What did you do, Neil? So you tried to go through it on your own?
Tried to, I mean, now isn't the time. I'll share the story.
No, all right, we'll do another time. I found, Scott, and I don't know how it was with you, and I don't blame people. I am not being judgmental. You know, Mum had to be in a home for many, many years because she could not be left alone. In fact, when I moved her out of her flat, the neighbours came up and I thought they were going to be horribly aggressive to me. And they said, thank you so much. We lived in fear that your mother was going to burn the block down. They were really scared of what she was going, because she was starting to do terrible things. And my relatives, I'd say, look, I've got to go and visit Mum. Do you want to come with? And they all said this, and I don't know if people said it to you. Well, you know, Russell, we want to remember her as she was. No, I can't get angry. That's their choice. You know, I'm not a dictator. That's it. I didn't have that choice. You didn't have that choice. It's tough.
No. In answer to that one, there are people that afterwards say to you, I'm sorry, I couldn't handle it. I didn't know what to do or how to react. That's not a lot of help to the carer, in all fairness. I mean, sometimes we all have to do things which are difficult for us. And we all have to kind of step outside of our comfort zone if it means we're going to support and love someone. I can't be kind of bitter about the few people that seem to disappear or anything. That's okay. What I do know is the people that were there. And first and foremost, my wonderful family, our very close friends. And they have been supportive to me since the day she passed. Because there's always that thing when you're the partner of someone famous, it's very easy for you to imagine that no one's going to want to pick the phone up to you.
Yeah, because you're not the star.
No interest anymore.
You're not the star.
The star has gone. You know, what interest is there? But thank God, Barbara and I had really good friends, and I'd say her showbiz friends, the large majority, especially our what I'd call inner circle, have been remarkable to me. Really wonderful friends. But I know you want to go back to early signs.
It's fine. No, this is a hugely important area because both with Mum, but certainly with my wife, you know, I get it. People can't handle it because it's not nice. There's no upside to it.
And the difficult thing I found is that Alzheimer's, dementia, I know one's a subset of the other. I'm not terribly good at defining them, but it's a very insidious process, if that's the right word. And it would try, if it was its own entity, it would try and convince you it didn't exist. It would essentially gaslight you into believing that you were the one in the wrong. And there was the mum that I knew who, like all human relationships, we'd fall out occasionally and then fall back in half an hour later. But this was different. And she turned, as I'm sure everyone here has seen, into something else entirely. And I didn't know if it was just her being awkward or the disease. And the disease was trying to convince me as much as it possibly could. What you're talking about, you're the one, I don't exist. Speaking through her, if you know what I mean. Mm-hmm. And it was the most, it was hideous because I didn't know what I was dealing with, this not knowing. That's what did my head in, I think, more than anything else, because you don't know what you're dealing with.
Yeah,
I'm not using the raw you.
I agree. I identify with that completely. It's the most awful thing, and at first you can't help but take it personally. You know you shouldn't, but you do. It breaks your heart.
Well, we're human. That's it. We're human.
Yeah, we are human, and it's the other thing that a lot of carers that I speak to as well in the same position will say is, I feel so bad I got irritable. Yeah, we get it wrong because we're human. And when, you know, I talk in the book about instances where we'd sit home night after night, and Barbara would sit there and ask me the same question over and over again. And I'd get to the end of explaining it, and a minute later she'd say, like, to her, it was the first time she'd ever said it.
It was the first time.
To me, it was the 12th.
This was Mum.
And
this was Mum. This is how it started, Scott.
This is how it started. In about 2009, I think, she was still at EastEnders, and I remember she came home a couple of times, and she said to me, she went, "You know what, love?" She went, "Something really strange happened." She said, "I froze. I went totally blank on the set today." Now, anyone who had ever worked with this lady would know she was the ultimate professional. She was always prepared. She had this kind of incredible memory that people would phone and ask her something if they didn't know what it was. And I thought that was a bit strange. And at the time I said to her, "Look, Bar, you've been in the show a long time. The hours were very long." I mean, if you said that to Barbara, she'd say, "You know, listen, love, I don't work in an hospital. That's what you call hard work." And I said, "No, but it's irrelevant, love. You're still there."
We're here. Oh, yep. Oh, no, you're gone that way. Hang on.
How did you do that?
How did you suddenly go portrait? We need your landscape. Otherwise, I've got to do the whole show. I've got to do the whole show like this. Oh, it's frozen. No.
It froze for a second.
It froze. Oh no. I'll be back. Right. Let's get some questions. Let's get some comments up, because they're going to block Scott when he comes back. Otherwise, Paul Claridge, as Russ and I both know only too well, when a serious illness comes along, some so-called friends will disappear. They won't tell me about it. Let's see if Scott's back. Hopefully, is he back? Yes. And he's back, just like that. Boom.
Oh.
You froze there, and that was absolute gold what you were saying. I don't want to miss a bit of this. So yeah, we had to do it quicker.
Okay. I think I most likely froze at the point where she said to me, "I'm not working in a hospital."
Yes,
I'm not working.
That was it.
Exactly. In an A&E department. And I said, "Yeah, but it's all relevant, Barbara. You get up at a lot of the time 6:30 in the morning, and you get home 7:30, 8 at night, and you're not a young lady," said very carefully, because, you know, but that is the reality, you know. When you push it, she loved her job, she adored her job, but I had to realize that she was increasing in age and it was taking its toll. Reluctantly, she agreed to leave EastEnders in 2010. Like every actor, she was petrified she'd never get another job, that no one would want her. And I said, I don't think that's going to be the case, Bar. But she went straight into do another pantomime. She loved pantomime, so she celebrating her 60 years in showbiz. She did pantomime at the Bristol Hippodrome, and I had to restrain her from doing too much, because she wanted to do everything. She was flying. Her entrance was from the rafters, where she had to be suspended 15 minutes before every show. She was 73. I was kind of saying, "But just take it easy, sweetheart." Anyway, along came a lovely advert as well, commercial advert for her, and very typically of her. I mean, it was wonderful, and it really was able to make her relax financially and everything. She'd always grafted, Bar. She'd had lots of ups and downs financially in her life, especially when I first met her. I mean, she ended up with £1 million debt, and this was before EastEnders. And she kind of went with the advert, although she was worried she wasn't working hard enough for it, because they only wanted 2 weeks a year from her. And I said, "Barbara, you've worked 70 years of your life for this job." I said, it's okay. Yeah. You've earned your stripes. So, you know, please don't feel too guilty about it. And you're bringing something to them as well. I just started to notice, though, after that period when she left, between 2010 and 2012, something was beginning to happen. She was becoming subdued. There was something about her personality that was just starting to change. I always said it seemed like a little bit of joy and sparkle had gone from her.
Yeah.
Just a little bit distant at times.
Yes.
Of course, the forgetfulness, the odd repeating of things. And I think it really, for me, kind of struck an alarm bell when I found the TV remote control in the fridge. And to me, I suddenly thought, hold on,
that is so.
This is more.
That just sums up. I know if you've never experienced being with, living with, or knowing anyone with dementia, Alzheimer's, you'll think, oh, either that's hilarious or no, that just sounds completely mad. I can tell you that is such a brilliant example of what you start to deal with, that you would open up the fridge and there would be the remote control. Absolutely. Yeah.
I found a bunch of the bits you cut off flowers before you put them in the vase. I found that in the fridge. And of course, but then my mum, and of course, this is the mistake, you're challenging them on it. My mum would deny it, or dementia would deny it. I like to separate the two. Dementia would say, well, that wasn't me. Well, that wasn't me. I didn't do it. I don't exist. I don't exist, remember? You're making it up, Neil, not me. All that vibe. Oh, it's vile. It's vile, Scott.
Awful.
Totally agree with you. The thing it took me quite a while to do, and I think this is a very difficult one for us as carers, is to learn with dementia there actually is a point where you just mustn't argue. Don't try and contradict them. It's their reality. And as hard as that is, don't worry, I had quite a lot of arguments when Barbara told me things that just seemed preposterous. And I was thinking, I was looking at it and I was going, Barbara, what are you talking about? You know, and she would have this argument with me and look at me and say, don't contradict me, because in her mind, which had become confused and distorted, what she was telling me was correct. And do you know what I believe?
It took me such a long time. And do you know, my mum's version of it, it was like a double level. It was so twisted because I would then play along, so to speak, but then she would know I'm doing that. Oh, you're just saying that to play along. And it was like, it was like levels within levels. It was absolutely, it had almost had an intelligence of its own, this kind of,
it's awful. Oh, Scott, I had to tell the staff, they said, well, when's your sister coming in? I said, I'm sorry. And my mother I'm an only child, and my mother, for reasons, had suddenly invented, she had a daughter. And I had to explain to the staff, because I wanted them to know we were a caring family, that I didn't have some bitch of a sister who didn't care about them. I said there never was. It was just extraordinary. And my grandfather, who I never met, who my mother loathed with a passion, because he went out to get a pack of cigarettes when she was 12 or 14, never bothered to come back. Truth. All right. Being very honest with you. And as the Alzheimer got worse, you know, everything was about my father. I'm thinking, where does this come from? Somebody that my whole life I know she hated with a passion. Extraordinary.
Yeah, it's distorted. Unfortunately, it's a very cruel illness. It, as we know, it affects the brain. They still, you know, they tried to tell us it was a social problem for a long time, and not recognise it as an illness, which is a way, you know, that they always had of not including it.
Hang on, you're freezing a little bit there, and this is fascinating. They tried to treat it as did you say a social problem, Scott?
Yeah, when it came to things like social care and things like that, they were calling it a social problem for long. Oh, it's because people are living longer. No, it's a horrible disease of the brain that you would not shun your worst enemy. That's what it is.
I fully agree. Right. I used to think also it was a mental illness, but what I've learned, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that it's a physical thing, but because it damages the brain, it looks like a mental illness because it damages the thing that we think with. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, in the old days, you know, it's very common. Even I can remember listening to people talk when I was a child and everything, and every now and then you'd hear someone say, if you went to someone's home, oh, our aunt lives with us. She's on a bit doolally. She doesn't come out there.
Doolally. She's having a moment.
Exactly what my mum used to say. You think I'm going doolally, and that was on a good day. And then she would go doolally, and then it wasn't her doing it.
Scott, sadly, the sound. I don't know what's happening. It's breaking up a little bit.
Oh dear.
Yeah, it's really sort of. It sounds like it's like Two-Way Family Favourites.
Do you want to? Shall we take Scott off and put him back on again?
I'm going to take you off for a second because what you're saying is so important. Yeah, I'm going to take you out and reboot.
No, sign out. Just press the leave studio button if you would, Scott.
I'll do that. There we go.
The amount, do you know, this is helping me so much having this conversation.
I've got to tell
how many
you,
people this is going to be helping. I'm finding this frankly healing.
I'm finding it so, I'm being very honest, so emotional. It's pushing me back to where I realize how much I've tried not to remember because it was just so bloody awful. Let's try.
I'm finding it kind of healing in a good way. Yeah. It's kind of.
Should we try again, Scott? You want to give it a go?
Hello, am I there?
Oh, that's awful. No, it's not good. Oh, this is so annoying because what you're saying is so fantastic.
Let me leave and come back.
All right. I'll let you leave. You leave, and then we'll do that. There we go.
I mean, this is absolute gold. Sandra said my nan was convinced that she could see her cat, even though when she moved in with her son, it didn't move with her. But I just went with it, and I'd hear stories time and time again within minutes. But again, we'll just go what my nan was saying. Yep. Yeah, that's a good wisdom, Sandra. But when I tried that with my mum, she'd go, "You're just saying that to try and catch me out."
It was vile. One of the things that doesn't get discussed, because getting dementia or Alzheimer's bad enough, it does not turn you into a nice person. I got to be really honest with you. My mum became. It was horrible.
I found because all human beings have positive and negative traits. Yeah. And my mum's thing, bless her heart, she'd always exaggerate things. And it was quite funny most of the time, but it became pathological. And it became so magnified that literally the roof was going to fall in at any given moment. I mean, there'd be when the plastic bottles, when they heat up, they go like that. Yeah. Just a slight click. She'd be like, "What's that? What's that?" And she'd be so tuned into it. If she was sitting here in the back room, she'd hear it in the kitchen. What was that? It's like she's tuned in.
Wow.
Completely different.
Let's try again. Let's try again with Scott.
Okay, is that horrible noise gone?
Yes, it has.
Yes, it
That's
has.
great now.
Where were we? This is gold, Scott. This is absolute gold. Please continue. Where were we?
Absolutely. I think I just took the tail end of what you were saying about the sounds. And the thing I learned about it was sound is like magnified in their heads when the dementia sets in and Alzheimer's. If Barbara was sitting in the kitchen on the stool and I used to cook and do the dinner and everything, if I was to accidentally drop a fork, as you do in the dishwasher, and it clanged against the metal, she would leap out of her seat like you had thought that the house had come crashing down. And I used to look at her in amazement, and I used to go, "Okay, love, it's only a fork." But what I learned was they are so sensitive to hearing, to touch as it progresses. All these things are just things you learn as you go along. And that's the other thing I was going to say about being carers. You must forgive yourself. You have to be compassionate with yourself.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you.
Because you can't get it right all the time. We're not natural carers.
We're put in this situation. We're doing our best. We're doing our best, but we're just punters. We're punters. We're not trained.
When you think about it, I mean, my a very good friend of mine did a very, very, very basic nursing qualification. This would not be specialist to care for someone with dementia. This is like the basic nursing, and that took 3 years. So suddenly, overnight, we're supposed to become masters or mistresses of something that would take 10 years to master. It's just it's the big ask it puts on ourselves. I found it impossible. Eventually,
the pressure was horrible. The pressure was horrible. Scott, you said something. Well, everything has been an extraordinary conversation.
Yes,
one of the things about touch, we had to move Mum from one care home to another, and because she wasn't doing much physically, two of the carers, and all of the carers were magnificent.
Yeah,
I've said this many times, but I want it on record because the media always paint them out as being mass murderers or horrible or thieves. They're just fantastic.
Yes,
and they're angels. They truly are. And we had to just help Mum along, and I'd forgotten this until this has triggered me, and she was screaming. I don't mean shouting, I mean screaming like you were stabbing her, because we were just trying to move her into the car to move her to the next care. It was horrendous. It was honestly, it was like a horror movie. And like you, like Neil, like everyone who's dealing with relatives with dementia and Alzheimer's, Eventually you settle down, then you try and go home, but you're feeling like drained. There's nothing left of you.
And
Nothing left of you.
I remember the day after I put her into the home, I walked into the home you see in the background now, because it was a family home. And then my inner critic, we've all got one, went, oh, well, she's never going to see the inside of that home again, and you did that. And I felt like I was the bad guy. I really hope anyone watching this is getting the same sort of feelings of healing that I'm getting just even talking about this. If you're watching this now, I hope this is really helping you in some way, because I'm actually a bit lost for words, actually, but I just hope you find it useful. This is incredible, Scott. I'm going to be quiet now. This is gold.
I have to say to you that Russ, you've just said something that's really helped me, because I write about it in the book, which was towards her final days, when they were trying to either wash her or give her an injection. And those screams you talk about, they haunted me for those first few months. And when I said to you about the diaries, rediscovering, that's because all I could hear at night when I closed my eyes was these horrific screams when I'd walked out the room to let them change her or do something. And they were, and you said it just right, a nightmare, a horrible nightmare that echoed in my mind. And at times I still hear it.
Yeah, me too.
And my stomach still drops when I hear it. And you know, it's I wouldn't wish it on anyone. It's unfortunate, as many people as they do have to go through it, because of the absolute magnitude of this illness, and it's growing. You know, let's not forget, 1 in 3 people born today will have dementia.
Jesus Christ. This is coming in from New York. It's a question for you, and it's a good one. It's a short one. People are putting very long messages, but it's going to take too long. Thank you. Everyone can read the messages. Please do, but I can't put them up. From Manhattan, does it strike anyone randomly? I'm not an expert, but I'm just going to say yes. I don't think there's... I guess it does.
As far as I know. There are some people where it is hereditary. They have a certain gene. I mean, for instance, I know a young lady, she's in her 30s. Her mother's now passed from it. She knows she has the gene. So do her cousins, which is possible they could have early onset dementia. You know, and people do get early onset dementia.
I've heard of it, and it seems to be more and more.
Do you know what shocked me, guys?
My theory is something to do with lifestyle.
I'll tell you what shocked me. One day in the home, I'm sitting there, and there's 3 youngish people, and you know, and I assume they're visiting their mum or they're visiting their grandmother or something. And slowly, like some awful thriller, when you see how the plot is going, I realize that the 2 girls, you know, they're in their 20s, I guess. The other young woman was their mum, who was very early 40s. She was in the care home. Oh man! And I thought, oh my God,
because science hasn't found the answer yet,
sentence to have.
Science keeps trying to find the cure. And I understand there's advancements and there's breakthroughs, but we ain't there yet, are we?
Absolutely. And just recently in America, they've got a breakthrough treatment, in actual fact.
I think I read about that the other day. It was relatively recently. I read about the last one, 2-3 weeks ago, maybe.
Yes, it's the most promising so far, which can actually slow it down.
It stops the protein build-up.
Absolutely.
The protein really plaque in the brain, doesn't it?
Yeah, do you know, my thing has always been up to now, of course we want a cure. I mean, yes, of course we need a cure. But even if there were treatments that we can develop which kind of can halt it in its early stages, so that no one ever has to go to that point we're talking about, of that confusion, of that terror, I think we'd all accept a little memory loss.
Totally. And I'm the first to admit it. I know my memory is nowhere near as good as it was. And also, and I've said this, a contributing factor is statins. I'm on statins, and in the very tiny small print, and people thought I was joking, it takes some of your memory. But it was the price I was willing to pay.
Yes,
I was willing to pay. They introduced some years ago a thing called Aricept. That was the the trade name. If you're an Aricept was meant to slow it down, but all it does is it buys you, in some cases, let's be clear, a little extra time. It is not in any way a cure.
We had that time of diagnosis, and her neurologist was very honest with me, and he said, Scott, this may help for the next 18 months or so. I always think it was 18 months, 2 years. I think it did help her, whether that was just her individual case that she kept going, and we tried to keep her active and working as long as possible. And that was the thing he said to me at the diagnosis. He said, make sure she keeps working, choose carefully. That Barbara's most familiar thing in her life is work, is acting. And that will be the thing that is retained in her brain. So don't think you've got to stop everything straight away, but you choose carefully. Between myself and Barry Burnett, Barbara's agent, we chose what she should do. Don't do live interviews after a certain time. I'm talking about in the sense of if you're an actress or a performer.
Yeah.
Because that would expose where she's going to start repeating herself or having blanks at that time.
Yeah.
So but I still think it's very important, and not to feel they've got to be shut away. This is a major thing. When we went public, and the first 4 years, Barbara didn't want to talk about it. That's the other thing that happens. So this was a secret for the first 4 years that we were dealing with, apart from a very few people who knew. And when we did go public, one of the things I said was it was impossible to hide the symptoms anymore. And we explained it to Barbara, and we said, Barbara, you'll be helping so many people, which really appealed to her. And in that moment, I looked in her eyes and I could see, you'll be helping people register. And she knew that she was getting worse. And the thing I said is, I said it in the interview at the time, I said, if I didn't do this now, if we didn't go public now, I'd have to keep Barbara in the house. Like there's something wrong with her, almost like a leper, that we can't take her out. I said, and that mustn't be the case with dementia. We have to learn to talk about it. We have to learn to include it in our lives, in society. We have to understand people may not always be behaving the way they were, but we have to be tolerant and we have to talk. We really have to talk about it.
Were people generally, because she was, and still is, let's be honest, such a beloved figure. I mean, it's very rare that somebody is, people go, oh, bad, I love her. That was it. Were the media generally, not people, because people would be on an individual basis, were the media generally kind to you at that point?
They really were. They really were. I think Barbara had a very good relationship with the press. She had a very good outlook towards the press. What Barbara always used to say, and she told me this very early on, and she said, listen, love, let me tell you something. She said, it's give and take. You can't turn it on and off like a light switch. If I want to go to the press when I've got a new book out or a new show and I want them to help me promote it, I'm all well and happy, aren't I, to give them an interview. If at some point they find something out about my private life, now that I'm in this open public arena and they want to talk to me about this story they've heard, she said, well, I'm afraid I'm going to have to take the rough with the smooth. She
Wise
said,
words.
You've just said something which nobody else has said. And we talk about, social media and showbiz and this relationship, PR, and that whole relationship is, as you've just said, Scott, and so many people do not get this point in the industry. You can't turn it on and off like a switch when it suits you. You're either in, it's like being a little bit pregnant, yes. There's no such thing. You're either in it the whole time or don't do it. Don't do it at all. But you can't just totally wander in. It's so important to understand that for your own, for your own mental health.
Can I just say, just finishing that point as well, that doesn't mean to say that the press can do anything or any wrongdoing. That, when it happened to us in any way, shape or form, was challenged. They can't just make up a story either.
No, it has to be fair. I was going to ask that, actually. I was going to ask that. It's not carte blanche to say anything.
There's a
'cause there are
line. It
elements
doesn't
of the
mean
press
carte
that will do
blanche,
that.
and she was very clear about that as well. But what she did say
Quite rightly
was
so.
there's certain leeway and give and take. You can't.
Isn't it wonderful in the way that people listening to this who might be in the showbiz fields are actually still benefiting from her life just by this conversation now, because they are wise words. They are wise words that you just said. You know,
and also
not to mention the ton of benefit by talking about what you've been through. And
I don't want to detour away from where we are, but also just in a couple of sentences, because Barbara had been brought up right through the industry and knew it inside out and worked so hard. If you have a reality show and some idiot comes along and think they're going to be a superstar in 10 minutes, they have no idea. They've got no training. They've got no background. They've got nothing to guide them. And that's why it's so often an absolute car crash. That's why. Of course it is.
Absolutely. Lovely comment from Leslie. Should we pop that one on the screen? Hearing Scott talk about things Barbara said is like listening to Barbara herself. It's wonderful. I'm not surprised she loved him so much. He's a lovely human being. I would concur with that. It's been amazing talking to you, Scott. It really, really has.
Absolutely loved it. Although I've now got to do this.
We've lost his sound again. Shall we take him out?
We've lost his sound again. No, Scott, no.
Come on, technology, not now.
Come on,
now
tech.
is not the time.
This tech. Come on, tech. Come on, tech. Thank you. By the way, record numbers viewing and listening all over the world.
I'm
today.
not surprised.
We've got all over America. What have we got? We got Kentucky, New York, Manhattan, northeastern states. We've got Spain. We've got France. Just blooming everywhere. And Dave Sleet just coming in from Fife in Scotland. The knowledge, understanding, experience, and respect of the relationship between entertainment and media is crucial. Yeah, if you want to be in it and not eaten up alive, absolutely right. Right. Let's keep fingers crossed that the gods of tech are smiling on you. Now, where can we get the book? Tell us the title. Plug the backside out of it. Go on.
Okay.
I'm getting a copy.
The book is published tomorrow, and you can get it on Amazon. You can get it in Waterstones. You can get it in all the major bookshops. It's called By Your Side, My Life Loving Barbara Windsor by Scott Mitchell. And I think that kind of says it all. And it's don't get me wrong, this is not just a book about Alzheimer's or difficult times. We start at the beginning when we met. We were together over a period of 27 years. And there were incredible times, fun times, happy times, exciting times, but, real ups and downs. Barbara always said, my life is a cross between a Carry On film and a Joe Alton play. And she was right. The most bizarre things happened to us during that time. But whatever happened, the stars aligned, and I believe we were meant to cross each other's paths.
Sure.
Despite the kind of doubts at first and everything else about the age gap, which to us was irrelevant, but obviously to other people,
of course, naturally, the media just loved that, and that must have been difficult. You're starting off a new relationship. You've fallen in love. You think this is it, and then the media just can't let it be.
Yeah,
Sodom. That's what I say.
I think also, in all fairness to the media, they reported at first. It wasn't just them. There'd be plenty of people who would be sitting in restaurants or looking over and sniggering and whispering and things like that. It was something that wasn't just for the media. It took people time to adjust to us.
Jerks. This is interesting, and this is a fantastic woman called Sandra Butler, who's been very, very kind behind the scenes to me, very generous. Let's just say that in terms of her charity work. I'll leave it at that. And Danny LaRue, by the way, this is Dan. They were very, very close. Danny loved Scott, and happy that Barbara found someone who loved her so much. That's the great Danny LaRue there. Living legend.
That's lovely. Thank you, Sandra. Thank you.
Yeah, you know what? It's true. Whatever happened, she had you. I know this sounds really schmaltzy, but I don't care. What the hell? She had you, and you loved her unconditionally, and that is true. And Danny, once he lost his partner, was lost. And then he lost the dog. I know that sounds silly, and he lost Jonty. He was just a lost soul. He didn't know what just the float of life.
I talk about Danny in the book.
Oh, you do? Oh, right.
Yes, yeah. We went to see him most likely about a month or so before he passed. He was living with Annie.
His dresser, Annie the dresser, because we did
in
Panto
Tunbridge
once.
Wells.
Yeah,
and I can't really. I won't tell the story because I don't really want to swear on your program. But
you can swear. It's fine. It's okay. Don't worry. Go ahead.
It was a lovely thing. We got down there and he said we knew he was poorly, but he really was poorly. I mean, he was literally asleep in the room when we went in, and he woke up and he saw Barbara, and it was actually heartbreaking, and because they've had this kind of 50-odd year relationship, and I can still picture her. She was sitting over him, and as they were talking about all their old memories of being in Winston's nightclub together and everything, she was stroking his hair, and he still had this wonderful head of hair, and I just remember her sitting very gently stroking his hair. And they were talking, and I kind of got quite choked up. I was standing a little bit back, and I thought, this is beautiful, a friendship of that long, and we're obviously coming to near the end of this situation. And he went to sleep. He fell asleep while we were there, and kind of Barbara stood up and she said, we better go. And she looked at him and she said to Annie, he's still so handsome, isn't he, Annie? And at that moment, he opened one eye and went, I suppose the fuck's out the question. I swear to you, that's how he left.
Brilliant.
That was the
man, we couldn't end this.
Devastated. That was a wonderful moment.
That's just priceless.
Yes,
Scott, I couldn't end this conversation on a more fantastic note. Good luck with the book. You have an open door anytime you want to talk about anything whatsoever.
Can I just say personally, the conversation that we've had today, Scott, it's been really beneficial towards me. I'm sort of feeling a little bit more healed about it all, just having this conversation with you, and the benefit with the people listening or watching, I think, is absolutely inestimable. Not only with the whole experience that you've talked about, but even the advice of which Barbara would have has said through you, depending on your point of view, for people in that industry as well. It's just been an hour of absolute gold. What a great guy you are. It's been an absolute joy to meet you. So.
Bless you.
Thank you.
Were lucky.
Thank you for
I'm going to say this. Scott. You were very lucky to meet and fall in love and be with Barbara. But I got to say, and I think everybody watching and listening, I think she was damn lucky to find you.
Yeah,
I think that's true. God bless you. Take care.
God bless. Take care.
Bye. Bye. What a great guy. What a lovely guy. Glassy Amanda, who's in the therapeutic community herself. I loved this show. Thanks for wonderfully inspiring. Sandra Butler, I remember the story, Scott. Paul Claridge. Barbara was and is a true British icon, 100%. I met her a few times and she was always lovely, totally. Coming in from Manhattan, New York, age gap, trailblazer Barbara, you cougar, you. Then we got I'm trying to rush through these as many as I possibly can.
Quickly say something to Asa Don Brown.
I'd love you to do so.
Well, I was reading this. I don't have a drink problem myself, but I like to read books about people's recovery. This is called One for the Road by David Wilson, and I'm just reading it, and then suddenly I see a quote by Asa Don Brown in there. I'm like, I know him.
Yeah. Huh? Yeah, his. I can't.
We've got to get him on the show.
Well, do you know how many times I've said to Asa? Asa knows this. Asa has an open invitation. Luke Newman is saying, "Wow, that was incredible." Thanks, Luke. I appreciate that, fella. And Julie Voice, great show. Thank you, Julie, for
amazing
watching and listening.
Feedback.
Record numbers today of viewers and listeners.
The quote from Asa is, "Childhood trauma does not come in one single package." We could unpack that for a good many days, couldn't we?
Oh, bloody hell! So couldn't.
I hope we do. Ross, what are you doing tonight, man? What are you doing tonight?
Oh, tonight I'm going to Watford to. Is it called the Old Pump House? I think it's called the Old Pump House. And I'm with Luther, the football. You know how much I know about football. Nothing. But I'm with the football legend because I've been trying to get him involved with the whole thing that we're doing with Luther Blissett. And we're talking about mental health in a live setting. We're just having a conversation.
That's amazing, Russ.
If you want to come, please come.
Good, well, good luck with that. I want to hear all about how that goes. But the fact that you're out there doing it, you know,
yeah, we're going to give it a go and see what it's like to do this, but with actually kind of with an audience and just have the conversation. Luther Bliss, top bloke he is. Right, that's it, gang. I will see you next week. Won't I? Today's Wednesday. Yeah, I'll see you next week. I'll be back on Friday.
As in me, I'll see you next week.
Yeah, you next week. We'll be back Friday. Take care, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us. Bye.